the Music Theory Lady. Hi guys, today we're talking about some of the basics of music theory. So we're going to be talking about staff and G clef or treble clef. So staff is the 5 lines and 4 spaces that you typically look at that has notes all over it. Without notes all over it, it looks something like this. So here's the 5 lines and 4 spaces. Usually when we're referring to those 5 lines and 4 spaces, we refer to them from the bottom up. So for instance, this line would be number 1, and then number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. So those are the 5 lines of the staff. So for instance, if I were to ask you to put an X on the second line of the staff, you would put it on this line, not this line, because that is the second from the top, but we're always counting from the bottom, so that would be the 4th line. And then we also do the same thing with the spaces. So the spaces would be, this would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 5 lines and 4 spaces all the time when it comes to staff. And you can really put notes on there anywhere, but you wouldn't know what part to play or how high or low that note is unless you have a clef. Clef is C-L-E-F. And a clef is what we use to show how high or low the notes on the staff should sound. We're going to talk about G clef today. And G clef looks like this. So you draw a dot, and then you draw kind of a giant hook coming out of that dot. Come down to a capital letter D, swirl that line around, and then cross that center line one more time, just like that. Let's try another one. Dot, draw up and around, down and cross. See if you can draw 4 or 5 more like that. Okay, now that you've had time to practice, we're going to go ahead and start drawing G clefs on the staff. So to draw it on the staff, we're going to draw that dot that we started with below the staff. We're then going to curve that line up above the staff. Then we will pull that line down to a capital D to about the 4th line is where that'll cross. Continue that all the way down to the 1st line and then wrap around that 2nd line just like that. Let's do another one. Dot, scoop up above the staff, capital D to the 4th line, scoop that down and around to the 1st line, and wrap across that 2nd line, just like that. So the reason it's wrapping around that 2nd line is because that 2nd line it's showing you is now what we're going to refer to as G. That's why G clef gets its name, is because it's showing you where G is on the staff. And when you apply G clef to the staff, it becomes treble clef. Treble clef or treble in music means higher pitches. And this G is a G that's a little bit higher on the piano, and so all these pitches that are going to be on the staff are higher in pitch, and that's why we call it treble clef. Now, if we were to figure out what all of the notes around G are, so if this 2nd line is G, that means we count. If we're counting up on the staff, we're going to go forward alphabetically. If we're counting down on the staff, we're going backwards alphabetically. So if this is G, going up would be A, B, and you go each line in space. C, D, E, F, and G. Actually, we don't have to know G today, but there you go. And then below that, again, when we're going down on the staff, you go backwards alphabetically. So backwards from G would be F for that 1st space, and then E for that 1st line, and so on and so forth. Now, you could memorize that the 2nd line is G and then count all the way up or all the way down every time, but that's going to get pretty time consuming. So instead, we're going to memorize just the lines and just the spaces to help it go a little bit faster. So the lines are E, G, B, D, F. And what I mean by that is this 1st line here that we labeled as E is E. The 2nd line is G and G. 3rd line was B. 4th line was D, and 5th line is F. So we just isolated just the lines. There's a couple ways that you can memorize E, G, B, D, F. One of the first ways is something I did with my piano students before I started teaching music theory, and that is we did hand staff, and then we counted each of these as E, G, B, D, F. So we would say E, G, B, D, F, E, G, B, D, F. These are the lines of the treble clef. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to use an acronym, which we use a lot of acronyms in music. So E stands for every, G stands for good, B stands for boy, D stands for does, and F stands for fine. So every good boy does fine. Now, you can use really any words that you want there. I've had people say every good boy deserves fudge and that kind of thing. It's really up to you. Whichever one you feel like you can memorize the easiest is the one you want to pick, because you want to get these memorized pretty quickly to move forward in music. The spaces, if you take them out, the first space is F, the second space is A, the third space is C, and the fourth space is E. So the great thing about this, sorry, it's not very clear there. The great thing about this is that that's already an acronym or a word on its own. You don't necessarily need a mnemonic device for it. It is face is what it spells. So the lines of treble clef are every good boy does fine, or E, G, B, D, F, and the spaces are face, F-A-C-E. That's all for today, guys. If you're in my class, I'll be sending out another video to help you on the homework. If you're not in my class, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.